From the thumbnail, you know what we're tying today. This is a hair jig based on a fly from Pat Cohen. I will provide a link in the description so you can see how he tied his fly originally. I like to tie this fly on a stand-up shaky head jig from VMC. I like the vertical orientation because I like this fly. Sorry, this jig has a lot of motion, and I like fishing this really slowly for those more wary fish, especially in the beginning of the end of the season. And I don't have as much time with this as a hair jig as I do as a fly, but I'm getting really similar results. It's working out really well. So tie a piece of marabou in by the tip and fold it back. You can cut that section off if you want. On something like this size, I'll just leave it. So tie in some UV polar chenille. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this UV polar chenille around the core of the marabou. This is going to do a few things. Well, really only one main thing. What it's going to do, it's going to help protect the core or the stem of the marabou by wrapping it around the core of the polar chenille. So that way toothy critters can't do as much damage to this hair jig as they might otherwise. So I'm using, I think these are called gator clips. They're from Loon. You don't necessarily need it, but it makes it a lot easier. Once you've got it spun up to where you like, just slowly pick everything out. And then we're going to wrap it forward. Before you wrap it forward, just kind of stroke all your fibers back. It makes the wrapping easier because you're not going to wrap over as many fibers doing it this way. So we're just going to do just barely touching turns. We don't want this, we don't want to restrict the movement of any of these fibers. We want them to move pretty freely. So if you stroke these materials back as you go and clean up any big tangles, it just makes the final cleanup process a little bit easier. And once you get to where the marabou stem is kind of thick, that's where you want to stop. If you tie with the marabou stem where it's thicker, when the stem gets dry, it tends to get brittle. You can offset that by wrapping back over the stem onto the fibers of the marabou, but we don't want to do that. We're trying to keep a nice, flowy, big profile in the water. So this usually takes 2. So we're going to tie in our second piece. Do the same thing, folding over that tip section. And you can obviously vary these colors if you want to change it up. You can do a lot of different color variations. I tend to keep this jig fairly simple in terms of, excuse me, color selection. You want to make sure that when you're spinning this, you move your hands forward. So if you keep pulling this back, the material back too much as you twist it, you'll put too much tension on it, and you typically will break the marabou stem first. So just be kind of gentle as you do this. Brush it all out. The narrower the stem of the marabou, the better this goes and the easier it is to spin. So try and pick your fibers, your feathers as carefully as possible, and it'll make the tying process easier and you'll get a better result in the end. So just keep wrapping this forward. You want to get fairly close to the back of the jig head or the front of the shanker, however you want to call it. That's just barely enough. I wouldn't mind maybe another wrap or two of marabou, but we're going to call that pretty good. So now we're just going to clean all this up. Give your tying point, your tying surface nice and flat. It'll make it easier to tie, and all your materials will be a lot more secure. So make this nice and uniform. Come in here, and I like to do a brush get any trap fibers out. We're going to brush this out again, but I like doing it a lot. These tend to get kind of mesmerizing for me. Alright, so now we're going to come in with a piece of rabbit. I like to use magnum for this. There is no reason for standard for this. This is not, we're not going for subtlety here. We're looking to have a really big profile on the bottom of the water that we can fish really slowly and kind of call in some of those more wary fish. So go down about 2.5 inches and pinch it through the hide and put it back on your vise. I don't know if I said I like the whip finish. That just gives me the security of not having to worry about my thread as I'm manipulating the hook to get it onto the zonker strip. So just stroke all these fibers down, pull your zonker strip forward, and I like to get down to the hide, just make your tying point a little bit smaller and a little bit more secure. So do a few tight wraps on it, a few tight wraps underneath it, trim it. Then we're just going to go back over there and clean it up and get it nice and secure and tight, keeping that tying surface as uniform as we can. That's my dog barking. Sorry about that. That looks pretty good. It's coming together well. So now you're going to come with some rubber legs. I like to use 4 or 5 down each side. So let's make a V with your material, with your rubber legs. Bring them back and just tie them tightly down the side of the shank. When you pull tight, you want to pull tight on those rubber legs so they don't move, and you can kind of collapse them so the tying area isn't so big, but not so much that you break them. And I don't trim these, and if sometimes when you make this V, one ends up being a little bit shorter or longer, I don't really care too much. I think the irregularity adds to the appeal of this jig. So once we get that all secured in, I'm going to come in here and grab up all these rubber legs and put a clip in there. Just gets it out of the way. And for the final piece, I like to use another piece of marabou. I typically like to having like a different color than I've been doing, and the barred just kind of gives it a nice look. It doesn't need to be as long as the other ones, maybe reaching half to 3/4 of the way down the hair jig. And you don't need a ton of turns. This is just adding a little flash of color, and I think it finishes out the jig well. Get that secured. Then we're just going to clean up this tying point. That looks pretty good. So give this hair jig a try. It's really good. It's actually really good year-round, but I tend to fish this when the fish are looking for a little bit slower presentation. Sometimes when they're really spooky, this works out really well. So give it a try. It's a great time to start stocking your boxes for the spring and summer so we can spend our time fishing. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.